There was a time when simply carrying a small piece of sharpened steel could get you arrested. Not because it was a weapon of war, but because it was designed so cleverly that it blurred the line between civilian tool and military contraband. The knife I'm talking about wasn't a sword, a bayonet, or even a dagger. It was a humble-looking pocket knife that changed how soldiers survived and how governments controlled what people could carry. And for decades, this knife was quietly banned from civilian hands. Today, we're digging deep into the forgotten story of the hidden pocket knife civilians were forbidden to own, and why it mattered so much that governments tried to erase it. This was no ordinary pocket knife. It was built for war, not work. During the early and mid-20th century, especially around World War II, knives weren't just tools. They were survival lifelines. Soldiers carried them to open rations, cut wire, and defend themselves when things got close. But one design stood out: the British Fairbairn-Sykes folding knife and its later descendants. Compact, concealable and razor-sharp, it was modelled after the elite commando daggers used by the SS and SOE during the war. Unlike typical folding knives used by farmers or tradesmen, this one had a narrow, double-edged blade and a locking mechanism that turned it from tool to silent weapon in seconds. Governments saw the potential problem right away. Once the war ended, many of these knives began circulating on the black market. Civilians loved them for their design and craftsmanship, but authorities viewed them as disguised weapons. By the late 1940s and into the 1950s, several nations, including Britain and parts of Europe, explicitly outlawed civilians from owning or carrying such locking, double-edged folding knives. They weren't banned for what they did, but for what they could do: give an ordinary man the deadly efficiency of a trained commando. What made this hidden knife so controversial was how perfectly it balanced practicality with lethality. It looked like a standard pocket knife, yet the blade's geometry, locking spine, and one-handed flick mechanism made it ideal for self-defense or sabotage. For instance, a soldier could slice through parachute cords or a communication line in seconds, but a civilian could also conceal it in a coat pocket without raising suspicion. Collectors today recognize this engineering brilliance. The knife's pivot design reduced friction, the steel was heat-treated for both hardness and flexibility, and the spring tension was tuned for lightning-fast deployment. Modern tactical knives owe much of their DNA to this forgotten model. It essentially pioneered what we now call the tactical folder. If you own a modern Gerber, Benchmade or Spyderco, you're holding a direct descendant of that forbidden military knife. The concept of a fast, reliable, folding blade you could carry every day started with wartime necessity, and later trickled into civilian life through underground craftsmanship. Governments feared one thing: accessibility. A double-edged locking knife could be concealed in a sleeve, disguised in a belt, or hidden in a cigarette case. When post-war soldiers came home with these in their duffel bags, the authorities panicked. The thought of trained commandos mixing back into society with easily concealed killing tools was enough to spark legislation. Britain's 1959 Restriction of Offensive Weapons Act, for example, made it illegal to sell or import flick knives and gravity knives, terms loosely applied to almost any rapid-deploying military folder. In the United States, the Switchblade Act of 1958 did the same thing. Ironically, this fear-driven legislation didn't just outlaw dangerous weapons. It also stifled innovation for decades. Knife makers had to rethink their designs, leading to the modern surge in one-hand openers that use thumb studs or assisted mechanisms instead of spring triggers. Even today, many countries classify certain folding knives as restricted or offensive weapons. And the origin of that fear traces straight back to this one hidden knife that blurred the boundary between soldier and civilian. Despite being banned, the knife's legend spread quietly through black market surplus stores and private collections. Some rural workers in Europe and Africa, adapted similar blades for practical tasks, cutting rope, grafting plants, or dressing small game. These users didn't see it as a weapon. They saw it as a tool that simply worked better than anything else on the market. Even today, survivalists and bushcrafters apply its core principles in legal ways. For example, they choose folding knives with solid locking mechanisms, corrosion-resistant steel, and ergonomic handles, all inspired by that original forbidden design. If you want to apply this knowledge practically, well, start by learning the laws in your area, then invest in a high-quality, legal everyday carry knife. Maintain it the same way wartime soldiers did. Keep it clean, sharpen it regularly with a whetstone and oil the pivot to ensure a smooth action. When you handle a modern folder correctly, cutting cordage, preparing wood shavings for fire, or slicing open gear, you're continuing a century-old tradition rooted in survival, innovation, and adaptability. Every time a new knife design hits the market with faster deployment or improved locking systems, you can trace its ancestry to that hidden wartime folder. The knife that civilians weren't allowed to own became the blueprint for everything from rescue knives used by firefighters to tactical folders carried by modern soldiers. What was once forbidden has now evolved into an entire industry of precision-engineered tools designed for both safety and survival. Understanding that history gives you a new respect for what you carry in your pocket. It's not just a knife, it's a piece of wartime engineering that has adapted for peace. The story of the hidden pocket knife civilians were forbidden to own isn't just about a banned object. It's about innovation born from war, fear turned into law, and a tool that quietly shaped modern craftsmanship. The next time you open a folding knife, think of the engineers who risked punishment to create something so perfect that it couldn't be ignored, even when it was outlawed. If you found this deep dive into forgotten military design fascinating, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning, share this with a fellow history enthusiast, and drop a comment about which hidden relic you want to uncover next. Every story has an edge. This one just happened to be sharper than most.